Hello, everybody, and welcome to something that it's sort of a review type thing. It just hasn't happened yet, obviously, because all of it hasn't come out yet, but I'm doing this because it's the best thing I can kind of do, and also I'm doing this live, so forgive me if I'm doing that. And also, I know I could be playing the game I'm reviewing, the multiplayer like I did with Halo, but unfortunately I suck with Gears multiplayer, and I also don't have it installed currently, so I don't want to have to wait to reinstall it. But we're talking about Gears. I played through all of the Gears campaigns, with the exception of basically one technically, because it isn't out yet. But I have not. But I have at least seen the content of some of the others. That being the DLC for 5 and the little extra story you get for Judgment. And yeah, I have done them. I have at least seen them. I haven't done them personally. I don't know if I will ever do them. It's very much a maybe. I don't know. But it's very much one of those things where I'm not 100% sure on it yet. But that being said, I want to talk about them because I did it with Halo and it went decently well. And I want to talk about Gears because I did enjoy them. Now, we're gonna start with Gears One because that's obviously the one I start out with. I did the Ultimate Edition. I did not do the most recent release of it because it wasn't out yet when I did my series on the Gears One. I did Ultimate Edition, and then I actually went back to the 360 versions for the older games, and then basically went from there. But Gears One was very fun. It definitely shows a lot of its age in the sense of it being a game from the 2000s era, and also obviously being made by Epic back before they became known for just making Fortnite. Um, but that being said, I think if the story was even just on its own was very nice. I feel like even if it didn't get a second game, it didn't really need it. It was kind of self-contained. Um, if it never got a sequel never got made, I felt like it would have been a nice story as is. Um, I'm going to probably butcher names in terms of the actors. I'm not going to be able to remember because I'm in a little bit of a rush. Trying to do this before I head out for the day. But the main character, Marcus Phoenix, being played by the person who plays Jake the Dog and Bender, who again, forgive me for not remembering their name. Probably like one of my new favorite main characters in a serious game next to me, like Doom or like Woods from COD or something like that. But it's regardless one of those things where it's like I like the game no matter what. Um, but overall, um, character writing in that game was very simplistic, and it definitely like there's a lot more going on here. It almost felt like they wrote the game with a sequel in mind, but it's also like one of those things where it's like they also did it in such a way that they didn't need to do a sequel. If they didn't get a sequel, they could have ended it there. Now I have not consumed any of the books, but I have consumed the entire storyline via a video that I will try to remember to link in the description below. That did include the entirety of the books as well as any extra DLC for Gear and also the Gears Tactics games. Because don't get me wrong, I was thinking about doing them in the series, but when I looked at how they were played, I'm like, maybe not. No judgment to the people who like those. It's just not for me personally, and I am one of those people who won't play games if it's something that's not necessarily designed for me, or if I don't necessarily enjoy it. Hence why, to be honest, Persona 5 has been put on hold because I'm not enjoying it that much. But with the general feeling I kind of have with the first Gears game is it's simplistic and very not necessarily one of those things where I would have wanted anything more from it. I think it served its purpose as is very well, and I really can't complain. It was fun. I enjoyed it. And I like the character writing in it. It's very much one of those things where I wasn't expecting it to have as good character writing in the first game because I've heard the later games get better. But even so, I still did very much enjoy it. Now we move on to Gears 2, and general thoughts on it, because I feel bad saying it, is it's a lot of several steps forward and but not enough. Several steps forward, but also a lot of steps back. It just felt too samey, which isn't always a bad thing. It's very much if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there is sometimes a problem with that if you're trying to make a sequel to a game and you don't do anything super unique with it. My memory on Gears 2 is a little bit hazier than Gears 1 because the Gears 2 just didn't really sit as well with me because it felt kind of like nothing. But even so, I will say some of the character in that game comes from its little story that you have with Dom and his wife Maria. That whole storyline with that, which we haven't done years. I'm not going to spoil anything there, but you have that whole storyline. I definitely think that's definitely part of the enjoyment of 2 is that storyline. But once it concludes, it kind of goes nowhere, and feels very empty otherwise. But even then, it's not necessarily saying that it's bad. I would just say if I had to choose between Gears 1 and Gears 2 to replay, I'm replaying Gears 1. But it's like, if I'm doing the whole series, I'm obviously going to play Gears 2. But if I'm just for the story alone, I'm doing just Gears 1, and then probably just not going to do Gears 2. Now, Gears 3 is where I'm more want to kind of talk about, because this is the one that I was the most anticipated for, given what happens in that game. And every single bad thing I didn't like about Gears 2 is fixed in Gears 3, down to the point where even the characters are significantly, not necessarily better written, but their arcs of their story continue. Even down to the other side characters that really only had a minor appearance in the first and second game are all now significantly better in this game. Obviously, you have the one moment that generally got a rise out of me, and I definitely am very happy that I played through the game and didn't know when it was coming, but knew it was coming at some point. Which I definitely think is one of the few games where I definitely say it's like, yeah, no, you don't want to go through. You want to go into these games as spoiler free as possible, and if you do know about how a certain scene, don't look up where it is and when it happens, especially how it happens, because it's one of those. Regardless, though, I definitely would say out of the original trilogy, 3 is my favorite, like easily without a doubt. It does everything I like about 1 and 2, and does it better. And then anything I didn't like in 1 and 2 is near non-existent in 3. And it's just an overall very good trilogy. And even then, if I had, again, I think it closes the story out very nicely with those 3, and then really nothing else was needed. I'm going to move on to, at least in my opinion, the game I liked the least and wanted it to be over the fastest, and that was Judgment, because it was just not fun. It was just a lot of the same, and very much like, hey, I know the story is kind of reliant on the little like the hard mode challenge that you get, but that it was not an enjoyable experience. It's the reason why when I found out there was a little extra, like, effective last story mode, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm good. I liked it in concept. It was definitely a little bit different, but I definitely understand why it's not necessarily everyone's favorite. In fact, it's definitely not mine. But I have not much to say on Judgment other than the fact that it was different. I like that it's a little bit of a prequel and kind of sets up more of the story of Baird and Cole, which was very nice because I did like those two. I thought it felt like their story was underutilized in the first 3 games, and having Judgment be effectively your here's how these two kind of became relevant type story. Then we move on to modern Gears with 4, and going into it, wasn't really expecting anything substantial, because something I noticed when games have their original creator effectively removed from them and bought out by Microsoft, it tends to kind of either go one of 2 ways. And I've noticed it's a consistent pattern with the 2 games I've played of that have this scenario, that being, yes, the original enemy that was in the game, they're not here anymore, it's something new, and you have to deal with that. But also, there's also something else new that you also have to deal with that now, too. That's just how Halo 4 felt. But even then, it was still fun. I enjoyed it. I think the addition of the DBs and all of the extra little bits and pieces of story kind of in the future of what happens after the events of 3 is very nice. I just would say the only criticism I have is that it feels it feels like another Gears game. It doesn't feel like unique enough to say that it's like, this is a Gears 4? Okay. I do like Kate. I think she's definitely a interesting character that I feel like got underutilized in that game, but improves upon in 5. It's a consistent thing I noticed, that the characters that I like typically are underused, and then in the next game they're utilized very well to the point where it almost feels like they're using them too much. But then again, that's just me. And even then, I wouldn't necessarily say they use the character too much in any of the Gears games, other than maybe the main squad. But even then, that's kind of the point. Is it's their story. Um, but overall, 4 I definitely think was a nice introduction to something new. But I understand why it's not for everybody. 5 is where you start to lose me because 5 felt like they tried to do two different types of games at once and then failed spectacularly at doing both. Um, However, I did enjoy it for what it did give us, which was a very interesting story that focused around Kate as opposed to um, I forget the main character's name in 4. He's in 5. I just remember forget his name. Um, but it's very much one of those things where it's like, yeah, I like them more focused on Kate because Kate felt more important in the story to 4, and she's barely in it, other than like being in the background. And then in 5, she's the main character, like the proper main character. Like, okay, good, this feels better. Um, but I just don't like how abruptly it ends, and that feels like it's the case for a lot of games in this with this problem, which is like, oh, the game's over. Okay, it's just over because Halo 5 had that problem where it just kind of ended and then nothing happened after that. Um, and then you have um, Halo Infinite, which just kind of disregards everything that happened with that last game and just kind of says, no, it happened, but we're not acknowledging it. It's like, okay. Um, that being said, the open world aspect of 5 was definitely interesting. I just don't think it was all that well executed, which is unfortunate because I did enjoy it for what it was worth. And it's very much one of those games where I felt like it felt baked, is the best way of describing it, where I felt like it wasn't doing enough to basically justify its existence. Which is sad because I like when games have not necessarily a purpose to exist, but I like when games have a good story and have something to kind of encapsulate everything. And Gears 5 kind of just does none of that. The open world sections were fun because I definitely think it added a little bit more, but it was also like, but why are these here? Why are we doing this? Outside of, I think, basically just achievements. They just felt like they were kind of there for the sake of, here's something to chase after for an achievement. And it's like, okay, cool, I guess. Other than that, though, I definitely would say there's worse games you could play out there in terms of Gears games. I'm excited for E-Day because it's very weird that it's not necessarily that they're not acknowledging what happened in the last game, but it's very much one of those things where it's like, hey, you know the game we just did? We're not going to pretend that it didn't happen, but we're not going to pretend that it didn't happen. So it's like, okay, one of these things is very interesting, and the other one is very much like, oh god, is this even going to work out? And I'm very much of the mindset of, I feel like this is going to be better than nothing in a lot of ways, and I definitely think that deep down this is going to be a game that I think is going to either do very well and have a good story, and then that's it, or it's going to do nothing and then just fall flat on its face before it even gets off the ground. And I have hope for it to be good, but I'm not gonna necessarily be crying if it doesn't succeed, you know? So it's like, I'm hoping it's good for the sake of hope. I hope it's good. But other than that, the Gears games are something, and I definitely would say play them. If you haven't already played them, play them. Obviously, if you are a Game Pass subscriber, you gain access to it basically for all of them for free, including the Ultimate Edition for Gears, so you can play the most modern version of Gears available, and then you can also very easily play the others through their original ports on 360, which is, I understand, for a lot of people can be kind of jarring, but even then it's like, I enjoyed it. I kind of was able to look past how jarring that the old game graphics was and was able to say, this is pretty good. And yeah, that's going to be the end of this. I'm excited for Gears of War E-Day, which I believe comes out later this year. I actually don't remember the exact date, but it's later this year, and I'm excited to probably cover that around launch. So yeah, that is going to be it for this video. If you guys did enjoy it, be sure to like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next video. Like, to make. Everybody, stay safe.